Welcome to the Talking Toughness series of podcasts, where we examine the mental toughness concept with guests from a wide range of sectors, illustrating that our mental approach to what happens to us and around us matters for all of us. Our guests come from the worlds of business and public service, education, social mobility, sport, and health. They all share their experiences and their observations about the factors that have enabled them to survive and to thrive on their journey through life. Many guests have gone further and incorporated the concept into what they do as coaches, trainers, managers, and leaders, helping others to thrive in their turn. Their experiences are valuable to those of us who strive to do the same. Our guest today is a true professional and now I think a friend. That's Andrea Naylor. Andrea is Talent Development Manager and Leadership Coach at Etihad Airways, which, as most people will know, is one of the world's biggest airlines. Originally from the UK, Andrea has worked in the United Arab Emirates for almost 15 years, and she can rightly claim to be one of the early adopters of the mental toughness concept in the region. I think that stretches back more than 12 years now. Since then, Andrea has embraced the mental toughness concept into a wide variety of settings, each with its own success story, whether it's individual development or team/group development. Over the years, Andrea has built up a body of expertise around the topic, which has enabled her to become a master trainer for the mental toughness concept, an initiative which creates an internal capability to train practitioners within a large organisation. Although she may not realise it, Andrea has in fact been one of the main sources of feedback which has helped AQR and its academic partners to develop the mental toughness concept to the level of understanding that we have today. So thank you, Andrea. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you for having me. That's definitely inspired me. I feel rather honoured by that very nice introduction, Doug. Thank you.
Well, every one word of it is true, so it's all earned. So I hope you're well.
All good, very good. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, it's great to see you again, Andrea. And I suppose that, as Doug mentioned, you've well known within the mental toughness sphere now and been using it for quite some time. So I just wondered, broadly, over the last sort of 10 to 12 years of using the concept, what are your kind of key learnings? So you probably had an idea when you started out, oh, here's what mental toughness is. But is there anything in learning about the concept that as you perhaps didn't think you were going to at the start?
That's a really interesting question. And I like to kind of, when I reflect on what you were saying there, it's really like being quite a journey for me as well, in terms of sort of first being introduced to the concept and then kind of going through different phases in different environments with different people using the concept. And I think one of the key things that I've kind of observed is just really the sort of depth of the tool and the impact of using the tool with individuals or whether that be with teams is often different. So, what you think that people might take away from it, it's not always the same. And I think one of the key things is just actually how powerful the mental toughness concept is. And once people really kind of understand it and they interpret their profiles and, really take away that feedback and then get very intentional about, how they might want to use it, then that's really, I think, where you see the magic happen, because that's where the transformation happens, right?
I like that idea of get intentional.
Yeah, and I think I've probably delivered now over that period of time hundreds of feedback sessions actually, and then extended using the mental toughness concept within sort of a team environment as well as the individual work. And there are some people that will sort of have the feedback session, and then that might be sufficient for them. They'll take what they need from it. But I think what I have observed is where people really get, as I said, intentional and really then start to focus on some of those sort of development options and put those in place, then you really do see some shift. So, just aligning that with people's goals in terms of what they want to work on, particularly around their own personal or professional development. Over those years, I've seen some really great success stories. And so for me, as a kind of a learning and development professional and a coach, I think that's the power that the tool brings, is that it really enables people to make sense of something that they can then sort of go away and get really sort of focused about actually now what do they need to do, or what do they choose to do to kind of to sort of apply the way that they think, because I think that's really what it comes down to. It's about how people think. The behavior change that results is really coming from how we think about things.
Yeah, I like that. It's a nice sort of turn of phrase, that apply how we think, to try and sort of add that intentionality. So if having done those hundreds of feedback sessions, like if you were to advise coaches on, so how do you really get someone into that sort of, right, let's start applying it, adding that intentionality, what advice could you give to coaches?
Well, I think the first kind of thing is around kind of raising the level of consciousness and awareness around, what they're reading in the report, and then how that translates for them. And then once a person's able to kind of self-reflect, because it's all about self-awareness, and quite often you will get individuals who perhaps disagree with the report, or disagree with aspects of the report. And I think so the power is really around the questioning and how you use the tool, and really how you sort of connect the different interplays between the different factors. And just really by sort of questioning, and also by challenging some assumptions. So, it's that kind of recognition as a coach that when somebody says something, we don't just take it on face value, because there may be something else underneath that. So I think sort of, using it as a way to kind of invite really powerful questions during the session, to raise sort of awareness and help people to get a bit more clarity over how a particular aspect might be impacting them, particularly in the workplace. And then you can really challenge some assumptions, particularly around limiting beliefs. Or it might even be just because, an interpretation that people kind of make for themselves based on their experience. So it's really, if to help people envision a future state, it's really about, as a starting point, they need to have that level of self-awareness, because without self-awareness, it's very difficult to coach anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully the tool provides some assistance in that. But I really like the way you kind of sort of mapping out for someone who's in one of your coaching sessions about how you're kind of affected by the environment, the way that you think and feel, and then translating that into actions and impacts and stuff like that. So I think that's it's probably some really valuable advice.
Andrea, I'd like to step in here with a question, because we've kind of known each other and worked together for some time. But you've got a very useful set of experiences, because you and your colleagues have used the concept and the questionnaire in significant volumes during a very important period. You've used it almost throughout the COVID period. And I'm interested to know why you used it during the COVID era and what sort of things you came across and how did it help individuals and the organization.
So yeah, during COVID, obviously with the kind of aviation kind of global business almost at a standstill for a few months, and it was such a significant impact for the business. We particularly took the decision to integrate it and continue with our learning and development programs, particularly around, we have a program called Grow with Etihad. And that program, we had to very quickly sort of, transfer everything onto a virtual platform, because at that time people weren't meeting at the office. And we also did a lot of initiatives around, trying to engage people into learning, because we had a lot of staff that were grounded at that time. So we took the decision to continue with our leadership development programs, and those were all delivered virtually. And the mental toughness assessment is part of the initial kind of program startup. So individuals, we have individuals at different levels in the organization and different levels of leadership development programs, and we use that as one of the assessments, whether then the participants get a feedback on that, and it really sets them up for success in terms of focusing on the core elements of the leadership program that they go through, and really is the catalyst to raising that kind of awareness about them taking the opportunity to reflect on themselves. So that was initially kind of, what we continued with during COVID. We just sort of moved everything virtually. We did all of our sessions, our feedback sessions also virtually, through Teams calls. I think we all became an expert in using Teams during that time, didn't we? Very quickly. So that was why we did it. And then the impact of that during that kind of COVID period, and what we did observe from doing those feedback sessions was that people found that really, really sort of helpful and supportive, because it was a time where many people were isolated. They weren't getting the social interaction with their team members, but it was also a great opportunity because it gave people time to really reflect on, kind of where they're at. People had a lot more thinking time, started maybe to question and reflect on their experiences, maybe their future development, where they might want to go. So I think it was kind of a challenge, but an opportunity at the same time. And we actually put quite a big volume of people go through those programs at that time. I think over 200 employees went through, our Grow with Etihad programs during the time that we were pretty much, all spending a lot more time at home and not being in the office. And then from that, it really, those people kind of would be connected with their colleagues, talking with other colleagues. And so, we got a lot more interest in people wanting to join the programs and get engaged in learning actually during that time. So I think it really made people really sort of take that step back and start focusing on self. And, people came off the sort of, busy day-to-day schedules and really had the opportunity to think about, reflecting on self and thinking about, where they want to go, what's the direction they want their careers to go in, etc.
Interesting. The COVID era was also characterized by a sense that everybody spoke about being more stressed, under more pressure, more challenged. Do you think that applying the concepts to these people helped them in that regard as well, to be able to deal with the stressors of that period?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the key kind of observations that we made during that period was particularly around the aspect around control. So the control aspect and the sub-factor of life control and emotional control. That was definitely something that came out, particularly for people who were on the more mentally sensitive side, or actually even many of those people that were quite balanced, and understandably so, because it was a very an unknown kind of situation that people were facing. And again, aviation was one of the most, biggest impacted industries across the world. And so, particularly for those people that were in very operational aviation specific roles, because you not only got that kind of concern about, will you, be let go from the company, but then actually, would you be able to find another job somewhere else? So really, we did notice that those people that were on the more mentally sensitive side of control, the control constructs, they really, wanted to talk a lot about their current situation, their thinking around that. So really kind of helping people to try to take a different perspective, to think of things maybe in a different way, by helping people to see what could be the possibilities and opportunities, and then really to sort of channel that focus into other areas. And like I said, we also then, in addition to that, had a lot more kind of virtual learning opportunities. We sort of channeled people into really helping them to just sort of think about the present and not focus too much on tomorrow, which is quite a challenge for people who are on the mentally sensitive side of that. Yeah, who might be prone to overthinking. And if you think about that time as well, I mean, here in this part of the world, people were also very physically restricted because they were not able to go out. Many people here are not got connection with families. They might be here alone. There was no opportunities for exercise. All the gyms were closed. So, a lot of the kinds of sort of coping mechanisms that people might typically have were sort of removed, especially for those like 4 months when we were pretty much all sort of locked down and there was curfews in the evening. So I think in terms of people having the opportunity to do the assessment and then reflect on that, again, just help people to make sense of where they were at that time and what this profile is telling me. And actually that's kind of, it makes sense because it makes sense for me.
I'm really interested in the way you talk about control there, Andrea, because of course, for many, there were a lot of things that became outside of your control that would normally have been in your control, like even being able to go to work, right? So just thinking about that specifically, what can you do for someone to try to change that perspective, to use or to develop that particularly sense of life control?
Yeah, so I mean, some of the sorts of things that I kind of discussed or opened up the sort of topic with some of the individuals that during that time and since is really, I think, the kind of the metaphor of being the captain of your own ship is quite a kind of useful one in terms of just kind of getting people to think, are you sort of on you've got your course and you're steering your ship and the weather conditions are coming and battering you, do you typically kind of stay on your course, or are you going to end up in a totally different destination? You're at the mercy of the weather. And I think that's quite a useful metaphor because it really helps people to see when we talk about kind of life control, it really is that kind of mindset of am I the captain of my own ship? Yeah. And how am I going to navigate this ship to where I want it to go? And do I feel like I have the kind of the resources, the internal resources to be able to do that? So in terms of thinking about other sort of things that have kind of helped people, it's really about also introducing the sort of concept around mindfulness. And some of the options that are in the development report around, setting very sort of small kind of goals, getting people to be reflective, using techniques like affirmation to help people to really kind of feel that they are sort of in control and to be able to kind of set their own course. I think particularly at that time, though, it was really because none of us knew what was going to happen from one day to the next. There was also sort of some comfort in the sense that, you know, there was that kind of thought that we were all sort of in this together, if you like, that this wasn't just something that particular individual was going through, that this was sort of, you know, their colleagues were going through, their families were going through. It was a whole global phenomenon, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. We had a conversation with someone recently about that kind of connection element and being able to sort of know that you're in it together with someone, or with other people and things like that gives you a sense of, and I think this is part of the self-awareness, right? When it's something like a pandemic that's affecting you, you know it's affecting everyone else, so it's easy to kind of see yourself as being normal, whereas when you just have normal, whether it's self-doubts or you struggle to keep your emotions in check, or maybe you're really high in control and you don't understand why other people can't just, you know, pull it together. You kind of individually, you're often unaware that, hang on, I'm the outlier here. I'm the one that's the odd one out. Whereas I suppose during something like the pandemic, it kind of gives you a sense that there wasn't really an odd one out. We all kind of fell within that same. We all kind of felt normal, I suppose.
Yeah.
Andrea, I know we've had kind of conversations about this in the past, and you alluded a little bit to it at the start of this podcast. But one of the things that's happened with the mental toughness concept and the questionnaire is we've kind of increased our understanding of the factors. The factors have grown from from 6 to 8, and that's introduced a lot of granularity, which means that we can understand individuals better. How important has that been in the work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so I think the more that we sort of understand about the concept and the broader, you know, that it's become through all of the research that's been done, is that it just gives us, I think, that those additional dimensions in terms of the interplay between the different factors. And I think that's kind of been really, really helpful, because it gives a much like broader perspective, right? You know, I'm thinking back to when we first started doing this. I think that was back with, you know, when I first started, was introduced to mental toughness, it would have been with the university students, right? With the 6-factor model.
Absolutely.
So it was the feedback from practitioners like yourself. So, for example, the commitment factor, when we had that 6-factor model, we spoke about it in terms of it being this kind of stickability, determination, you know, not giving up on anything. And it was through coaches having conversations with people as well. When people are trying to unpick their score, we had things in the development report saying, like, you know, are you motivated by goals and targets and those kind of things? And people saying, yeah, I am. But then they might score relatively low or, you know, medium. And it was actually through that we were able to sort of say, well, actually, there might be more to this. Perhaps being motivated by goals and targets and having that sense of purpose is not quite the same as sticking to it, you know. And that was how the commitment scale from the MTQ48, which had the 6 factors, was further developed into the MTQPlus. So we owe a huge debt of gratitude to people like yourself, Andrea, for being able to sort of feedback conversations with users.
I think Andrea was probably, if I remember correctly, the very first person ever to come back with a query about the commitment scale. I think it was Andrea who noted that somebody had got a reasonable level of score on the commitment scale, but still didn't deliver. And she asked me why. And that kind of provoked that. Then we started to notice a lot of other people began to ask the same or a similar question. And that meant we had to look at it.
Yeah, I think that one is always kind of an interesting one, because that's often the one that people, particularly I've observed when they have sort of balance scores in there, they're like almost sometimes disappointed, because there's this notion that, particularly if they perceive that they are somebody who's very goal orientated. And it's sort of like, it's in the balance area. That's often the one that they, I think specifically when they're reflecting on how they operate in the workplace, that they do pick up on, and they say, oh, I thought I would have been much higher on that. I'm always someone who meets my deadlines. I always kind of deliver everything that's expected. And that's often the one that comes up in those sort of feedback sessions where people start querying that.
Yeah. When you've used the questionnaire, and of course you and your colleagues have now used the questionnaire quite a lot, and you've used it before and after in some programs. Have you been able to notice a change in mental toughness, and has that translated into anything that's valuable for either the individual or the team or the business?
Yeah, I mean, we've with some individuals, we for the programs that we run, we test at the beginning and then we offer that at the end, but we don't make that compulsory. We did do a program actually with our technical department where we had like a development assessment day when we used the mental toughness questionnaire at the beginning, and we did feedback following their assessment development day where they took part in different activities. And then for certain individuals that continued with a coaching program from that, we then did a retest. And those retests were done like 9 months later. So we definitely did see some shift. I've got a couple of examples. One was somebody who an individual who was on the sensitive side with emotional control, but overall level of mental toughness was around I think it was an 8. It was towards the kind of more mentally tough side on most of the concepts, other than emotional control. And what was really interesting about that particular individual was they really sort of made a very kind of concerted effort through going through a coaching program to really focus on that. This was somebody whose emotions were, very visible to colleagues, that the person was aware of that. But it also recognized that through feedback, this was also something that was potentially holding him back in terms of his career progression and where he wanted to go, because of the impact that it was having on others around him, both his kind of supervisors above him and also kind of his colleagues and other team members. And then he attended the sort of one-to-one coaching sessions. Then he was also part of our group coaching program. And it was really interesting to see. You could actually see some real behavior shifts for this individual. He was really sort of focused on, giving people the space to speak, for example, not reacting emotionally in meetings and the sessions. And so we actually saw, when we tested him, we did see a shift. So I think he moved from like a 3 to a 5, which was really sort of really good progress for him within that sort of 9-month period. And then we also had another chap who was at the opposite end of the scale on control, so a 9 on control. But in terms of the areas that he wanted to focus on, it was really more around the confidence and the interpersonal confidence. So we saw quite a drastic shift with this individual. And again, it goes back to that once, for some people, they might have the level of self-awareness, and for others not. And so you raise the self-awareness. But even for those that have the level of self-awareness and they're aware of what is blocking them or how they're thinking, the challenge is they just don't know how to deal with that or what to do. Or how do I do things differently? How do I think differently? So, from kind of the results of the questionnaire, and then with that sort of practice and going through, being coached or perhaps being mentored by somebody else in the business where they're really focusing on these aspects and they've got clear clarity around that, then you do really see that shift. So we've had some really good success stories. We've had individuals that, have, been promoted. They've really sort of worked on some behavioural traits, and that's resulted in them kind of getting other opportunities within other departments. So we've had some really great successes that we've seen. And ultimately, we're talking about if we change and if we raise the awareness, if we change the way people think, then we can regulate the emotions, and then we see that those behaviour changes. And I always say to the individuals who kind of, once the feedback session is completed, and we do offer the opportunity to do some personal one-to-one coaching, I always say to those individuals, there is no magic pixie dust. I don't have any pixie dust with me. And, if you really want to make these changes, then all I can say to you is that it is always possible to do that, but it's going to take hard work and intentional practice. And without those two things, the magic really happens outside of the sessions, right? So the mental toughness helps us to raise our awareness around what it is that we might want to take. But then we really need that continuous support and intentional practice and reflecting on ourselves and using a lot of the development techniques like, journaling or, centering ourselves, or whatever those techniques that we can support people with to help them to develop those coping strategies, then that's where you really see a big shift. So we've definitely found it really helpful. And in fact, like some feedback from some of our business leaders, it's had a really big impact there. And it's particularly had an impact, if I go back to the sort of projects we've done with our technical department, typically people that enter into an engineering technical world, they're very focused on, the technical side of things. And it is traditionally very male dominated, so there isn't really a lot of opportunity for people to talk about what they're thinking or express their emotions. So I think that's kind of been really, really helpful to individuals to be able to have the opportunity to sort of just reflect on some of the aspects that come up in the report, to be able to express what they think about it, to be able to think how, what strategies they can develop to make those shifts and changes. And, really you're talking about changing mindsets, right? So we've had some really great successes, and that really has started from them doing the assessment and then having the feedback, and then all of the smaller interventions that happen after that.
Yeah, some fantastic examples in there, Andrew. And you talk about whether it's people at kind of opposite ends of a scale on the MTQ, or the work happening outside of the coaching session, assuming you don't have the magical fairy dust to take away, and things like that. I wonder then, I'd be interested in your reflections on what kind of culture do you need within an organization to kind of breed the sort of positive approaches to mental toughness?
Well, first of all, like a culture of diversity, in terms of not just diversity in terms of the sort of makeup of individuals in the organization, but really about having a culture of diversity of opinion, create an environment that fosters people that they can, express their opinions, that, being transparent, building a culture of trust, accepting that people are where they are, and having that kind of growth sort of mindset. I mean, from an Etihad perspective, we've been very much focused on trying to, build a learning culture. We want our talent to continue to work in the organisation. We want to help people to grow, and that growth isn't just from a technical aspect. Obviously, in an airline, you have a lot of technical types of careers, but obviously, we have great engineers, technicians, and operational staff. But for those individuals to grow, then they need to develop those broader kind of softer skills. And quite often, as probably in many technical organisations, we promote people because they're great technicians or engineers, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're setting them up for success with some of the broader skills that they need. So I think that sort of culture of, having a learning culture within an organisation is really key. And having kind of, welcoming aspect to accepting kind of and being very inclusive in terms of who is the learning for, because learning should be for everybody. There might be different learning opportunities at different stages. And if we think about kind of, from the completing the MTQ, we're really people who are, going to move forward with whatever it is they feel they need to develop, then they need to have access to that further learning as well. So I think that's one of the key things for us, is that, we've really harnessed on making learning much more accessible, and, helping people to have a mindset that actually it's irrespective of what job you do, it's irrespective of what grade level you are at. There are so many opportunities for development and learning, and being successful isn't just about sort of climbing up the corporate ladder into the next grade. It's actually about, how do you kind of develop yourself as a whole person? How do you become a potential to be a really effective people manager? How do you build yourself to set yourself up as kind of into a leadership position, and really helping people to sort of adopt a leadership mindset, because we often sort of think in the corporate world, or leaders are just those people that are sitting at the top, right? But actually, no, everybody's a leader, because that's actually a mindset choice as well, right? We're all making decisions for ourselves. And if you think about sort of, what we take from the MTQ, and we look at something like the commitment scale around goals and achievements.
I think, Andrea, that's a great point on which to finish this podcast. And I love the way you finished it, because I'm often accused of being the philosopher in a group, but you're bringing philosophy into this podcast. You're bringing the idea of everyone can be the best that they can be, but also this idea of contentment. Whoever you are, wherever you are, you can still, if you're self-aware, achieve contentment. And the other big takeaway from me is you go on about self-awareness all the time, and I think that's absolutely right. The mental toughness concept and the questionnaire are extremely valuable tools that give you a language through which you can access something that is otherwise invisible, and they give you a tool to be able to kind of see it. It's a bit like having an X-ray machine to look at the inside of you. But what's really important is, can I use that information, and can I use that to better myself? And that's what self-awareness is about. So you brought that out really, really well, Andrea. So there may be people, I'm certain there will be people who will be really interested in perhaps connecting with you and learning about what you've been doing at Etihad with the concept and how you've built it into coaching approaches. How can people get hold of you?
So they can contact me on my email. Do you want me to?
Please.
Yeah, so naylor@etihad.ae. Feel free to connect with me if you are interested to know more.
And they are likely to find you on LinkedIn too.
Yes, on LinkedIn. Yeah. Andrea Naylor. You'll find me there.
Brilliant. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.
Great stuff. Cheers.
Cheers.